So we've gotten that third reading on first quarter GDP this morning. It is Thursday, June the 27th, and we typically get many different variations of the quarterly GDP report. This morning we got the third reading on this, and what we saw was the actual number for GDP for the first quarter came in a little bit better than expected. The second reading was 1.3%, and it actually came in at 1.4%. Some of the changes there was actually less spending on goods, less spending on services as well to some extent. There was more CapEx spending. It was less of a net export drag than they had originally reported in the second report, and there was a bit more state and local government spending. Now, when we look at into the details of this report from a personal consumption, for the personal consumption component, remember that's the biggest part of GDP. Personal consumption actually came in much lower than what they had originally put in the second reading. The expectation or the estimate was that personal consumption was up 2% for the quarter, but it actually was only up 1.5%. The other thing that we've been looking closely at is that inflation component of the GDP, your core PCE price index. And remember that when this originally came out very hot, they did revise it down to 3.6% for the quarter, but actually now that got moved back up to 3.7% for the quarter. So mixed inflation reading here for the Fed, weaker consumer. We've known that. The consumer has been weak to start off in 2024. We're also seeing from the expectation for the second quarter GDP that from the 1.4% is actually going to rise 2% in the second quarter. We still think that is a little optimistic, especially since we've continued to see the weakness in the consumer. The housing data has been very weak. Manufacturing is still contracting. So the one thing that we'll be looking at is that CapEx, the CapEx numbers that we get for the month to try and get a better indication for second quarter GDP. That's all we have. We'll actually be back later this afternoon when we will get some information on the CapEx reading here for the month of May. And then we'll be back tomorrow with the PCE indicator, which is the Fed's preferred inflation gauge. Thank you very much.